My name is Tiffany Liang, and my Capstone Project is a case study on the use of manipulatives to build deeper conceptual understanding in a middle school mathematics classroom. The reason I chose this topic is because I was always very intrigued by manipulatives. Our school had a lot, and I wanted to incorporate them in the classroom to make class more engaging. But in my first year, I was actually discouraged by some more experienced teachers and was advised not to use them. As a new teacher, I took their advice and focused on practice and activities that were paper-based, but soon realized that my students were not understanding concepts well, nor were they retaining the concepts. So I started researching the use of manipulatives and lessons that I could incorporate, and was surprised to find that there was limited research for the middle grades. There were also not many lessons specifically designed to align with the middle school curriculum. Most of the research and lessons I found were for elementary levels lessons or interventions for the special education students. So I adapted lessons through the year and implemented whatever manipulatives that I could or that I knew how to. My students had some academic growth, and they were more engaged in the lessons, but it seemed like they were engaged because the manipulatives were new to them, and the connection between math concepts wasn't adequate. So I attended 2 professional developments over the course of 2 summers, and it truly opened my eyes to the use of manipulatives, which leads me to the main purpose of this study. The purpose of this study is to provide evidence on the benefits of the use of manipulatives and conduct a case study to see whether or not the manipulatives would increase student achievement in a middle school math classroom. Here is a list of the references I used to support my project. Literature mentions 2 types of manipulatives, concrete and virtual. Concrete manipulatives are the physical objects that students can touch and hold in their hands, such as dice or algebra tiles or cubes. Virtual manipulatives are the online systems, such as Desmos graphing calculator, that take place of concrete ones, which are said to be just as effective as concrete manipulatives. Literature also states the benefits of the usage of manipulatives, such as increase in student academic achievement, and how it lessens their anxiety towards mathematics. For English language learners, it provides language support by helping them visualize the abstract concepts and gain a deeper understanding. But then the question arises of why it's perceived so negatively if there are so many benefits. This is because a lot of the secondary teachers actually view manipulatives as toys for younger children. It's also generally viewed as something for intervention students or special education students. Teachers also have a lack of understanding of how to implement manipulatives into the classroom, and a lot of times this results in classroom management issues that may not have occurred before, and this causes them to shy away from using manipulatives in the classroom. Literature also provides suggestions of successful implementations of using manipulatives in the mathematics classroom. It's a combination of familiarizing the students with the manipulatives itself, attending some professional developments to gain more insight on how to utilize manipulatives in the classroom, and of course, planning the lesson. Now I'm going to talk about the case study. The purpose of this case study was to see whether or not the use of concrete manipulatives will reinforce conceptual understanding and increase student achievement. Due to dimensional analysis being one of the most difficult topics that my students have struggled with in the past, I decided to take this opportunity and use this lesson as it allows my students to investigate the effect on surface area and volume when dimensions of an object change proportionally. The case study takes place in a Title I school located in the Southwest Houston, Texas area. The students involved are 74 8th grade students from 3 different pre-algebra classes. Some of the former topics that were relevant to this lesson were the effect on linear and area measurements of dilated two-dimensional shapes and the calculation of surface area and volume of rectangular prisms. In this lesson, students were actually asked to use linking unit cubes as a manipulative to explore the effect on surface area and volume as the dimensions of a cube, a three-dimensional object, is scaled. This lesson provided the opportunity to review concepts that they have previously learned and apply it in a new context. The lesson went across 2 days, 90 minutes per each lesson. As a formative assessment, there was a post-assessment consisting of 4 questions at the end that the students needed to take. On the first day, students were introduced to linking unit cubes and also reviewed the calculation of surface area and volume of cubes. Then they were asked to work in groups of 2 to 4, depending on the class size, to investigate the effect on surface area and volume as the dimensions of the cube were scaled. On the second day, the whole class discussion took place, and once the students demonstrated a concrete understanding of the effects, the students were given 30 minutes to take a post-assessment, and the post-assessment again consisted of 4 questions regarding the effects of linear surface area and volume of 2- and 3-dimensional shapes. This data was then compared to 2 questions extracted from a previously administered district assessment. And at that time of the district assessment, the use of manipulatives was not incorporated within the lesson. So the idea of the post-assessment was to see whether the use of manipulatives had reinforced mathematical understanding and led to academic growth. So over here you can see the results of the district assessment, which was the previously given assessment, and the post-assessment results. According to the data collected on the district assessment and the post-assessment, there was an increase in student achievement. On the district assessment, 16% of the students answered both questions correctly, whereas 42% of the students answered all 4 questions correctly on the post-assessment. And when you compare question 1 and question 2, which were similar questions on the district assessment and post-assessment, there was a 31% to 59% increase in accuracy. And looking at the questions 3 and question 4 on the post-assessment, those questions were involving 3-dimensional objects on the post-assessment, and even those had a lower accuracy compared to those dealing with 2-dimensional objects, students were still performing at an average of 35.75% higher than the district assessment. So there was a definite increase in student achievement. The results of my case study are actually consistent with what the literature indicates. The results display that students have a better understanding of mathematical concepts being taught, and it reinforced what was previously learned. It also exhibits clear improvement in student achievement. As literature suggests, the use of manipulatives can positively affect students' mathematical understanding and allows them to explore concepts using manipulatives and develop a stronger understanding of current concepts and make it more meaningful along the way. And a couple of connections to the professional seminars, particularly social justice, best practices, and leadership. So, like most of the teachers, I chose to teach because I care about my students' well-being. So I want them to be successful not only in the classroom, but outside of my classroom as well. So when students are exploring concepts with using manipulatives, it not only strengthens their conceptual understanding, but allows them to investigate in groups where they're utilizing physical and verbal and analyzing skills that are much needed to be successful in life. So to raise awareness for the use of manipulatives in the classroom, I'm advocating for the well-being of my students. And when it comes to best practices, visualizing and planning questions made my teaching more effective. Instead of just asking students to recall a formal concept or stating a fact, when it came to the whole group discussion, I had a list of questions that I previously created when I was planning that consisted of open-ended questions that challenged my students' thinking. And because it was well planned, even when a question wasn't anticipated, the lesson still ran smoothly. And because the students were so engaged, classroom disruptions were kept to a minimum, if non-existent. And lastly, as a district professional learning community PLC leader and department chair, I feel like I'm also in one of the best positions to share my case study results and promote the use of manipulatives in a classroom. I can encourage my fellow teachers to implement at least one lesson incorporating the use of manipulatives, or recommend them to incorporate a manipulative that they are familiar with in a lesson to support student understanding. That small change can make a huge difference when it comes to better foundational skills in the lower middle grades and benefit students' understanding where they move on to higher grades, which will also benefit the students when it comes to the vertical alignment aspect of teaching mathematics. So instead of treating concepts as individual ones, they can actually connect the different concepts, thus leading to more effective teaching. So I entered the teaching profession with the well-being of my students being the utmost priority. And now that I've experienced firsthand the benefits of using manipulatives, I myself have made a commitment to continue incorporating manipulatives into lessons. And my personal goal is to simply teach a new lesson involving manipulatives or incorporate a new type of manipulative into the classroom each year, if not each semester. And that concludes my project. Thank you for listening.